You got to win the midterms, because if we don't win the midterms, it's just going to be, they'll find a reason to impeach me. I'll get impeached.
It lands almost as a throwaway line, the kind of sentence you'd miss if you weren't listening for the fracture underneath it. Donald Trump doesn't talk like a man confident in the law. He talks like a man counting exits. He doesn't dismiss impeachment because it's illegitimate. He dismisses it because it's dangerous. Because it is, quite literally, one of the last constitutional instruments that can still reach him. And that fear tells you more about the current state of American democracy than any poll, any rally, any press release ever could. Strip away the noise and the shouting and the manufactured chaos, and the picture becomes disturbingly simple. Trump understands power in one dimension only: constraint versus freedom. Anything that limits him is an enemy. Anything that delays accountability is an ally. Institutions are not civic structures in his mind. They are obstacles. He does not ask whether an action is lawful. He asks whether anyone will stop him. And for years now, the answer has increasingly been no. This is why impeachment occupies so much real estate in his head. Not because he believes he governed cleanly, not because he trusts the courts or respects precedent, but because impeachment is one of the few processes that does not require his consent, his approval, or his cooperation. It does not need him to agree that he's crossed a line. It is Congress asserting that lines exist at all. And that is precisely why the refusal to use it matters so profoundly. What happened here is not subtle. Democratic leadership, faced with repeated and escalating violations of democratic norms, has chosen management over confrontation. They have chosen caution over consequence. They have chosen political arithmetic over constitutional duty. This is not speculation. It is stated openly, repeatedly, almost proudly. Swing districts, messaging discipline, voter anxiety, cost of living. The argument is always the same. Accountability is important, but not now. Democracy matters, but only if it polls well. Listen to that logic carefully, because it carries a dangerous implication. It suggests that the rule of law is conditional, that constitutional enforcement is optional, that democracy is a luxury item you defend when it's convenient and quietly shelve when it's politically risky. That is not how democracies die in movies. That is how they die in real life. Authoritarianism does not arrive with a single dramatic moment. It advances through erosion, through normalization, through the steady lowering of expectations, through the quiet acceptance that certain behaviors are now just how things are. When a president threatens political opponents, floats the idea of canceling elections, toys with serving beyond constitutional limits, and treats public opinion as a personal insult rather than a governing constraint, those are not isolated gaffes. They are data points. They form a pattern. Trump's own words expose this mindset with remarkable clarity. When he complains that he has the right policy and the public simply doesn't understand, he is revealing something fundamental. In his worldview, legitimacy flows from himself outward. If the public disagrees, the public is wrong. That inversion is incompatible with democratic leadership, which rests on the idea that power is loaned, not owned, and can be revoked. And yet, instead of treating that inversion as the alarm it is, democratic leadership has largely chosen to route around it. They criticize, they warn, they fundraise, they issue statements heavy on adjectives and light on action. They talk about norms while declining to enforce them. They describe an existential threat while refusing to use the very tools designed to confront one. That contradiction is not theoretical. It has consequences. When impeachment is dismissed as futile because conviction is unlikely, the point is being missed entirely. Impeachment was never designed as a partisan stunt or a guaranteed removal mechanism. The framers were not naive. They understood ambition. They understood bad faith. They understood that factions would exist and loyalties would harden. Impeachment exists because they assumed there would come a moment when a president might place himself above the law. It is the formal process by which consent is withdrawn. That withdrawal matters even when the Senate fails to convict. It creates a historical record. It names wrongdoing. It forces the system to articulate where the lines are. It tells future office holders that abuse will be confronted, not absorbed. Trump himself inadvertently confirmed this by constantly returning to the fact that he was impeached twice. He protests too much because the label stuck. It mattered. It still matters. By refusing to impeach now, despite behavior that is arguably more overt, more threatening, and more corrosive than before, Democratic leadership is sending a different message. They are redefining consent as permanent. They are signaling that once elected, a president operates in a zone of near total immunity, constrained only by elections and polling cycles. That is not restraint. That is surrender dressed up as pragmatism. Complicity does not always announce itself with cheers. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like a strategic pivot to safer topics while constitutional violations pile up. Sometimes it looks like voting down accountability measures because the timing isn't right. History does not reward those distinctions. It does not separate the hand that strikes from the hand that looks away. Both contribute to the outcome. There is also a moral incoherence at the center of this strategy that cannot be ignored. Democratic leaders routinely describe Trump as a unique and existential threat to American democracy. If that claim is sincere, then refusing to pursue impeachment is indefensible. Extraordinary threats demand extraordinary responses. If the claim is exaggerated for campaign purposes, then the public is being manipulated with fear while leaders quietly decline to act. Either way, trust erodes. Polling consistently suggests that the public is far more open to accountability than party strategists admit. What voters doubt is not the principle of impeachment. What they doubt is whether anyone in power is actually willing to fight for democratic norms when doing so carries personal or political cost. Avoidance reinforces the belief that the system is performative, that outrage is theatrical, and that consequences are reserved for the powerless. Trump understands this dynamic instinctively. That is why he frames elections not as a test of governance, but as armor, why he treats midterms as a shield against accountability rather than a referendum on policy. He is openly acknowledging a constitutional truth. Congress still has power if it chooses to use it. His anxiety is not about public opinion alone. It is about the possibility that someone, somewhere, might finally decide to enforce the rules. So far, that decision has not been made. Instead, what we are witnessing is the normalization of abuse through inaction. A president who openly disdains democratic constraints is managed rather than confronted. His threats are contextualized rather than prosecuted. His authoritarian impulses are analyzed endlessly and answered rarely. This teaches the public a devastating lesson. Even extreme violations may be met with nothing more than cautious language and strategic delay. Democracy cannot survive on speeches alone. It requires action, especially when that action is uncomfortable, especially when it carries risk, especially when it forces institutions to reveal whether they are decorative or functional. The refusal to impeach Trump and those enabling him is not a neutral choice. It is an affirmative decision to prioritize short-term political comfort over long-term constitutional integrity. It aligns leadership not with resistance, but with normalization. And when the tools designed to defend the republic are left unused, collapse does not happen despite them. It happens because of that refusal. Midterms will come and go. Poll numbers will fluctuate. Strategies will be revised. But the precedent being set now will endure. If a president can threaten elections, intimidate opponents, dismiss public accountability, and face no impeachment, then the concept of consent of the governed becomes a slogan rather than a reality. History is unforgiving in moments like this. It does not remember who thought the timing was wrong. It does not remember who worried about messaging. It remembers who acted and who allowed the erosion to continue. Those who decline to enforce democratic norms will not be remembered as cautious strategists. They will be remembered as participants in the failure. This moment is heavier than a single election cycle. It is a test of whether constitutional mechanisms still function when power resists them. Accountability still matters. The only open question is whether anyone in authority is willing to prove it. If you want to understand where this is going, don't just watch the speeches. Watch the silences. Watch which tools remain untouched. And pay attention, because missing these moments means missing the warning signs while they are still warnings, not postmortems.